Hello everyone, welcome to Past, Future, Facts, and Beyond. Today, we're going to be talking about the top 10 worst individual deaths in history. This is in no particular order as this list is subjective and each death is quite gruesome in its own right. So, let's get right into it. Coming in first on our list is Saint Lawrence. A Christian deacon in Rome, he met his horrific death during the persecution of Christians under Emperor Valerian in 258 AD. As part of the Roman crackdown on the church, Lawrence was arrested and ordered to hand over the church's treasures. Instead of surrendering material wealth, Lawrence presented the poor and sick, whom he considered the true treasures of the church. This act of defiance enraged the Roman authorities, and they sentenced him to a brutal execution. Lawrence was condemned to be slowly roasted alive on a large gridiron. According to legend, even in the face of such excruciating pain, he maintained his sense of humor. At one point during his execution, he is said to have quipped to his tormentors, "Turn me over, I'm done on this side." While this remark is likely a later embellishment, it became a part of the narrative of Lawrence's martyrdom, symbolizing his steadfast faith and courage in the face of extreme suffering. His martyrdom made him one of the most revered saints in Christianity, and he is now regarded as the patron saint of cooks and comedians, a nod to the grim humor associated with his death. The event highlights the brutal methods of execution used by the Roman Empire against early Christians, and Lawrence's defiance and faith are remembered as a powerful testament to religious conviction. Second on our list are the deaths inflicted by Vlad the Impaler. While this does not keep up with the theme of individual deaths, we decided to add them due to their sheer violent and gruesome outcome. Vlad III, commonly known as Vlad the Impaler or Dracula, was a 15th century ruler of Wallachia, infamous for his preferred method of execution, impalement. Vlad used this brutal punishment not only against his enemies, but also against criminals and those he deemed traitors. Impalement involved skewering a person on a long, sharp wooden pole, which was typically inserted through the victim's anus or vagina, and sometimes the chest, gradually exiting through the mouth, shoulders, or back. This method of execution was designed to prolong suffering, as the victim would often remain alive for hours or even days, as gravity slowly pulled the body further down the pole. The process was excruciatingly painful and horrifying to witness. Vlad often impaled large groups of people at once, creating gruesome forests of the dying as a display of his power and a warning to others. Vlad's reputation for cruelty has been immortalized in both history and legend, and he remains one of the most notorious figures in medieval history. His savage methods of control earned him the nickname Dracula, and his legacy continues to inspire fear and fascination centuries after his death. Third up is Girolamo Savonarola. A Dominican friar born in 1452, he became a prominent figure in Florence for his fiery sermons against the corruption of the Catholic Church, particularly targeting Pope Alexander VI. Savonarola called for moral reform, denouncing the wealth, excess, and immorality he saw within the church and society. His fervent preaching gathered many followers, and he even led the infamous Bonfire of the Vanities, where books, art, and luxuries were burned as symbols of worldly corruption. However, his outspoken criticism eventually led to his downfall. In 1497, he was excommunicated by Pope Alexander VI, and shortly after, he was arrested by Florentine authorities. Tried for heresy, Savonarola was condemned to death. His execution in 1498 was particularly brutal. He was first hanged, but his death did not end there. His body was then burned alive in the Piazza della Signoria in Florence, a slow and agonizing way to die. To prevent any veneration of his remains by followers, his ashes were scattered in the Arno River, ensuring no relics could be collected. Savonarola's death marked a grim end to his crusade for moral and religious reform, but his influence lingered in Florence and beyond, leaving a complex legacy of religious zeal, controversy, and martyrdom. The fourth entry on our list is Balthazar Gerard. Born in 1557, he became infamous for assassinating William of Orange, a key leader in the Dutch struggle for independence from Spain. Gerard, a staunch Catholic, believed he was serving the Spanish King Philip II by murdering William, whom he saw as a Protestant heretic and traitor. However, the punishment Gerard faced for this assassination was among the most brutal in recorded history. After his capture, Gerard was subjected to days of gruesome torture. First, his right hand, the hand he used to kill William, was burned off with a hot iron. This was just the beginning. His flesh was then torn from his body with red-hot pincers in various places, a method designed to cause excruciating pain over time. As if this weren't enough, Gerard was sentenced to be quartered while still alive, his limbs tied to 4 horses, which pulled in opposite directions. The slow dismemberment was agonizing, and during this horrific process, his heart was ripped out of his chest and shown to him before he finally succumbed to death. This extreme and prolonged form of execution was intended to make an example of Gerard, demonstrating the fate that awaited anyone who dared to challenge or assassinate a leader of such importance. His death remains one of the most violent and torturous executions in history, remembered for its sheer cruelty. Fifth on our list is William Wallace. This legendary Scottish patriot who fought for Scotland's independence from English rule met a particularly brutal and horrific death at the hands of the English in 1305. After leading numerous rebellions against English occupation, Wallace was captured and brought to London to face charges of treason. Despite his unwavering commitment to Scottish independence, Wallace was condemned to die in one of the most barbaric forms of execution ever devised, being hanged, drawn, and quartered. His execution was a lengthy and agonizing ordeal. Wallace was first hanged, but not to the point of death, ensuring he remained conscious for the next stages of his punishment. After being cut down from the gallows, he was subjected to evisceration. His stomach was cut open, and his intestines were pulled out and burned in front of him while he was still alive. In addition, his genitals were cut off as a further act of humiliation and pain. Only after this unimaginable suffering was Wallace finally decapitated. His body was then quartered, with each of his limbs sent to different parts of the kingdom as a grim warning to others who might defy English rule. William Wallace's death was as brutal as it was symbolic. His martyrdom cemented his place as a national hero in Scotland and a symbol of the struggle for freedom, and his legacy has lived on for centuries, notably dramatized in the film Braveheart. Despite the cruelty of his execution, Wallace's courage and determination remain an enduring testament to the spirit of resistance. The sixth entry on our list is Grigory Rasputin. An infamous mystic and close confidant of Russia's Romanov family, he met a death as mysterious and controversial as his life. In December 1916, a group of Russian nobles who believed Rasputin's influence over Tsarina Alexandra was a threat to the Russian Empire plotted to kill him. However, Rasputin's death turned into an almost legendary event because of how difficult it was to actually end his life. The assassins first invited Rasputin to a private gathering, offering him cyanide-laced cakes and wine. To their astonishment, Rasputin showed no signs of being poisoned, even after consuming large amounts. Realizing the poison hadn't worked, they resorted to shooting him multiple times, yet Rasputin still managed to cling to life. According to some accounts, he even attempted to escape. The conspirators then beat him severely, but Rasputin, still fighting for life, was finally bound and thrown into the icy Neva River. Autopsy reports later revealed that despite the poison, the bullets, and the brutal beating, Rasputin's actual cause of death may have been drowning. Water was found in his lungs, suggesting he was still alive when thrown into the river, making his death a long and terrifying ordeal. Rasputin's death became the stuff of legend, embodying the mystery and intrigue that surrounded his life as the healer and spiritual guide to the Romanovs. It was a symbol of the desperate attempts to save a crumbling Russian Empire in the years leading up to the revolution. Seventh on the list is Emperor Valerian, a Roman emperor who ruled from 253 to 260 AD, suffered one of the most humiliating and agonizing deaths in history. During a disastrous military campaign against the Persians, Valerian was captured by King Shapur I of the Sasanian Empire in 260 AD. Instead of executing the Roman emperor immediately, Shapur subjected him to years of brutal humiliation and degradation. Valerian was forced to serve as a human footstool whenever Shapur mounted or dismounted his horse, a profound insult to the dignity of a Roman emperor. For years, Valerian endured this public humiliation, becoming a living symbol of Rome's defeat at the hands of Persia. However, his suffering did not end there. After years of captivity, Shapur ordered Valerian to be flayed alive. His skin was slowly and agonizingly peeled off his body, causing excruciating pain. Once Valerian died from this torture, his skin was stuffed with straw and displayed as a trophy in a Persian temple, further mocking the fallen Roman emperor. Valerian's death was not only an excruciating physical ordeal, but also one of the most profound humiliations in the annals of Roman history. It marked a significant blow to the prestige of the Roman Empire, as the capture and prolonged suffering of an emperor had never before been seen on such a scale. His story stands as a reminder of the brutality and cruelty that could befall even the most powerful rulers in history. The 8th entry on our list is Ananda. One of the closest and most devoted disciples of Buddha, he met a tragic and brutal end in the 2nd century BC. Revered for his deep spiritual connection to Buddha, Ananda played a key role in preserving and transmitting Buddha's teachings after his death. However, later in life, Ananda faced accusations of breaking his monastic vows, though the exact nature of the accusations remains unclear in historical accounts. As punishment, Ananda was sentenced to one of the most horrific forms of execution used in South and Southeast Asia at the time, being trampled by an elephant. This method of execution was both symbolic and torturous. Elephants were regarded as symbols of power and authority, and their use in executions was a public spectacle meant to demonstrate dominance and instill fear. Ananda's death, like others sentenced to this fate, would have been excruciating and drawn out. As the elephant slowly crushed his body, each movement would have caused immense pain, and the death could take several agonizing minutes. Though remembered for his profound spiritual contributions and closeness to Buddha, Ananda's death by trampling remains a dark and tragic chapter in his life, reflecting the harsh and brutal punishments of the time. His execution stands as a reminder of the severe consequences faced by those accused of wrongdoing, even in monastic communities. The 9th entry on our list goes to Marcus Atilius Regulus. A Roman general during the 3rd century BC, he became a symbol of Roman virtue and loyalty through his tragic and agonizing death. Regulus was captured by the Carthaginians during the First Punic War, a fierce struggle between Rome and Carthage for dominance over the Mediterranean. After his capture, the Carthaginians sent Regulus back to Rome to negotiate a peace settlement and his own release. However, Regulus, embodying the Roman ideal of honor, advised his fellow Romans to reject the Carthaginian terms, knowing it would seal his fate as a prisoner. Upon his return to Carthage, the Carthaginians took revenge for his betrayal. Regulus was subjected to one of the most prolonged and torturous deaths recorded in ancient history. He was deprived of sleep, a form of torture that leads to extreme physical and mental suffering. To further torment him, Regulus was reportedly confined in a barrel lined with sharp nails, which tore into his skin whenever he moved. He was also exposed to blinding sunlight, causing additional physical pain and disorientation. Regulus' death was not swift. It was a slow, agonizing ordeal that lasted days, possibly weeks, as his captors inflicted suffering in retaliation for his advice to Rome. His willingness to endure such unimaginable pain for the sake of Rome elevated him to the status of a martyr and hero in Roman history. The story of Regulus's torture and death became a powerful example of loyalty and self-sacrifice, illustrating the brutal realities of war and the lengths to which both sides would go to achieve victory. The final entry on our list is Robert François Damiens. This man attempted to assassinate King Louis XV of France in 1757 and faced one of the most brutal and prolonged executions in history for his crime. Though his attack on the king was unsuccessful, merely wounding the monarch. The severity of his punishment reflected the symbolic significance of regicide. The French court sought to make an example of Damiens, subjecting him to a gruesome public execution designed to instill fear and deter any future threats to the crown. Damiens' execution began with extensive torture. He was first subjected to red-hot pincers that tore at his flesh, ripping chunks from his body while he screamed in agony. As if this weren't enough, molten lead, boiling oil, and burning sulfur were poured into his open wounds, further intensifying his suffering. This torture lasted for hours, with each stage of the process designed to maximize pain and suffering. The final phase of Damiens' execution was the most notorious. His limbs were tied to 4 horses, each positioned in opposite directions, in a method known as quartering. The horses were meant to pull his body apart, but the process did not happen quickly. For hours, the horses struggled to tear Damiens' limbs from his body, and when they failed to complete the task, the executioner had to use knives to assist in the dismemberment. The drawn-out nature of the quartering made the ordeal even more horrifying for both Damiens and the crowd witnessing the execution. Damiens' death was not only excruciating, but also symbolic of the absolute power of the French monarchy at the time. His crime of attempting to kill the king demanded the harshest possible response, and the brutality of his execution remains one of the most extreme punishments ever recorded. His death, taking hours and involving unbearable pain at every stage, stands as a grim reminder of the lengths to which authorities would go to punish crimes against the crown.